Hello, and welcome back once more to the Inquisitor Podcast with me, Marcus Cauchi. Today, my guest is one of my favorite return guests, Todd Caponi. Todd is the author of The Transparency Sale, and he's just released a new book on negotiation. We're going to go into some detail about the book, but what we're also going to do is slay a few fatted calves around negotiation, what it is, what it isn't, the blind spots, the unasked questions, and the trouble you can get yourself in by being seller-centric and selfish rather than being totally transparent. So without any further ado, Todd, could you give us 60 seconds on your history and how you ended up writing Four Levers Negotiating?
Yeah, it's so long-time sales leader, full-time nerd. I've always had this trigger in my brain around wanting to understand human decision-making, behavioral science. And then I'm also maybe the only person on the planet who's a sales history nerd, where I've got a collection here. My office smells like the far corners of your grandmother's basement. I've got books from the late 1800s, early 1900s, artifacts, fully restored 1908 phone back there. But I had a revelation back when I was the chief revenue officer of a tech company here in Chicago, where I am, back in 2017, 2018. It led me to write the first book, The Transparency Sale. We can talk a little bit about that because I think you've got some pieces in there that we'll probably want to sprinkle in. But I thought the book would suck. I'd never written a book before. My English teacher in high school is probably still laughing that I could put coherent sentences together at all. But it took off. I wrote a second book called The Transparent Sales Leader, and then the new one, Four Levers Negotiating. I can't believe I'm still doing this. I'm blessed by it, but it's all founded on that idea that transparency and clinical empathy sells better than pretending you're perfect. And we got to do it anyway in this world of information proliferation and AI. And I'm just trying to help people do it.
Well, what inspired you to write this specific book?
Well, there's a number of things. I think at its core, growing up in sales, I always thought it was weird. And I don't know if the listeners feel this way too, but sales was supposed to be, and I was taught to look at it through the lens of helping customers achieve optimal outcomes, right? We're building relationships, we're building trust, get them all the way to the goal line. Customer says, yes, I want to buy from you. And then, at least the way I was taught is, even subconsciously, I thought, cool, I'm going to start lying to you now. I'm not going to tell you what a good deal is. And as a matter of fact, I learned everything I know about negotiating from former FBI hostage negotiators. Like that seemed crazy to me, the most important point in that sales process. And we are eroding trust. We are focusing on our own outcomes, no longer yours. And I just think it's crazy that we're treating negotiation like the peak of the sales engagement, where it was 20 years ago, sure. But today, in this as a service economy, in the proliferation of information and AI, it's merely an early milestone on the path to having customers who buy, stay, buy more, advocate for you, take you with them to their next company. I just don't see how it's sustainable that we continue to do it this way and that we have every customer paying a different amount based on how well or poorly you negotiated it. I just think that's a race to the bottom right now. I had stumbled on a kind of a cards face up approach that builds trust. You discount less, you forecast more accurately. It's been working for 17 years in my organizations that I ran. I've been teaching it, I've been writing about it, and it was just time to get the book out and make sure that the rest of the world is able to leverage this opportunity to kind of create this sound basis in their pricing.
What still, I'll say it disappoints rather than surprises me, is how often sales organizations forget that we exist because of, not in spite of, the customer. And in this day and age with AI, they've pretty much got access to pricing across the board. They have access to information. In the past, sales was probably the single biggest provider of continuing education in life and in business because they were the controllers of information. But now, with a few keyboard strokes, you've got access to the sum total of human knowledge. Admittedly, often it's somewhat distorted. But when you think about it, most organizations are seller centric. Salespeople aren't taught that they should be focusing on the customer's outcome first and make that their priority, they're fixated and triggered into psychological dis-ease, where they go into survival mode and they're fixated on trying to make the sale, get the deal over the line this quarter rather than next, and to make commission. And the net result of that is that we've earned the reputation that sales probably deserves. So the first thing I'd like to do is get your appeal to leadership and investors first. What would you like to say to them?
Well, all right, to your point about seller centrism, I can't tell you how often I walk into an organization and they tell me they're buyer centric. And that's cool. Like, I understand that, but I would tell you that it's a systemic problem in two ways.
Yes.
Number one is, like, when I travel and speak and teach and stuff, I always try to find some historical element. And I was in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is back, it was like 1601, 1602, when they had actually stood up the first public stock exchange. And I believe that when we think about seller centrism versus buyer centrism, that's one of the reasons why we'll never totally fix the problems, is because when you've got investors and you've got a public market, you have to impress them in the short term. Otherwise, people pull their money out. You could be in trouble. You're going to get fired. And so we've almost created a systemic, on a macro level, focus on short-termism. And that means seller centrism, right? Number two, though, is when I look back at the history of the sales profession, late 1800s, early 1900s is when the modern sales profession really took hold. And what's amazing to me is that every sales process and every forecasting methodology was truly buyer-centric. And it was what you heard in Glengarry Glen Ross in the early 90s. Blake from Mitch and Bury comes out and spews AIDA. He actually got that part right. That there's arguments about who actually came up with this concept. I believe it was Arthur Sheldon. But AIDA was theorized to be the process that every buyer goes through on their journey to make a purchase, right? They first are paying attention. Hey, are they paying attention? All right, cool. Are they interested? The I. Have we seen through their words and actions a desire for what we have to sell to them? And then A is, are they ready to take action? Buyer centrism. The reason I bring that up is macro level investors, the micro level, these organizations that say they are buyer centric but are systemically seller centric, is just look at their stages in their CRM. They're all seller stages: discovery, qualification, demonstration, proposal, negotiate. The sellers get their endorphins moving the deal through the sales cycle, through what they are doing. We can go, oh, we're buyer centric, sure. But no, what actually gets measured, what actually gets triggered as progress, is what the seller's doing. I actually proposed in my second book, The Transparent Sales Leader, a way to overlay buyer centrism over your forecast through not AIDA, but kind of the modern version, which is buyers go through a why change, why you, why now cycle. I didn't make that up. I stole it. But the point being, there's an opportunity to look in your systems in your own organization and break that seller centrism problem that we've created. And when you do, your forecasts become more accurate. Who knew? I'm able to forecast when a buyer is going to buy based on what they're doing and not what the seller's doing. Who knew? But you also build better relationships and you create that trust that I think is so required in the world of selling.
Well, one thing I'm going to dispute is Berkshire Hathaway seems to have done a remarkably good job by playing the long game and obsessing about the customer. And at one point, they were without challenge in terms of private equity and funds. And they've lasted, what, 60, 65, 70 years? So there is clear evidence out there. It does not have to be that way. But short-termism and greed and selfish self-interest and ego and vanity appear to have been the overriding and dominant forces.
Right.
So in terms of how the brain goes through decision-making, the neuroscience and behavioral science tells us something slightly different. The first thing that happens is we have a thought. That leads to a feeling, which triggers an endocrine response and emotions, at which point the forces of inertia and anxiety kick in. So that's the magnetic attraction of do nothing. And then the fear of what will happen if they get it wrong So that's anticipatory buyer's remorse. If those are overcome or neutralized or not triggered, more to the point, then they make a decision and then they take action. But then there's the voice in their head and they remember how they felt. And I think almost no sales process factors in any of this. As you said, the CRM is entirely seller centric, and that gated process drives the wrong type of behaviors. So if we are operating with a model that is counter to the interests of the buyer and their brain perceives us as an existential threat, is it any wonder that we settle for outcomes like a 3% win rate on cold outreach or a 1% win rate on cold outreach, where we're okay with a 15% close rate? If you just flip those numbers, you're failing 85% of the time to close your prospect pipeline, and you're wasting 97 to 99% of your time, your money, your resources, and your talent on dead work.
Exactly.
Forgive the French, but what the fuck? I mean, seriously, how stupid and inane do you have to be to not see that clearly?
You know, one funny one that I was guilty of as a sales leader is this concept of that all of your salespeople need to have 4x their quota in pipeline at any time. Like you've probably heard that. Like hey,
Yeah.
you got to have pipeline load, pipeline load, pipeline load. I always looked at that and at the time and I was like, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Like we close 25%, we got to make sure. But what are we actually doing when we do that? Well, number one is when we say, hey, Marcus, where's your 4x, your quota and pipeline? What do you go do? You do it. You fill it with crap. As a result, what do we also do? Well, we lose slowly because, like you said, the most valuable asset we all have to convert to revenue is our time. It's never going to be any earlier than now. But hey, I got to have 4x my quota and pipeline. So I'm leaving crap in there that I know is never going to win. And then number two is that means we're only closing 25%. You know, that's even an aggressive number, right? I just think, hey, why are we creating these systems that cause us to hold on to crap? Wouldn't it be great if we had 4x our quota and pipeline, but we were closing almost all of it because we got better at qualification and we weren't afraid to disqualify quickly and spend our most valuable asset on the opportunities that could actually close. So that's one of those metrics that's always that I used to do, and now I look back on and go, "What a dumbass! What was I thinking?"
I've got a client I coach who has a 68% close rate, which he's not happy with, but 68%, and he sells to greenfield new accounts. All the other salespeople on his team sell to the install base, and they have a 9% close rate. Um, and the major difference is his emphasis on being curious. Every time he touches the customer, they advance just a little bit. He doesn't rush. He doesn't try and BANT qualify people because what's the point?
Exactly.
I mean, BANT qualification. Let's just have a rant at that first of all. What would you say to a sales leader or manager who is trying to get their SDRs and AEs to qualify for BANT off a cold call?
I'd say you're bananas, right? It's funny that, like, there's a lot of debate about where BANT came from. If you Google it, you'll find that IBM came up with it in the 1950s. That's complete horseshit. Like that's just not true. I actually found a historian at IBM, and I was like, "Hey, I keep seeing this. Is there any truth to it?" And they're like, "No, like there's none." But like this idea that as we went through the Great Depression and the 1940s, we started to have manufacturers building big things that required massive checks. And so there was an element of selling organizations having to figure out that, hey, listen, before we dig too deep into this, your investment's going to be between X and Y. If that's way out of whack, can we deal with that now versus later? Because if we were talking about an 8-figure solution to a 4-figure buyer, one of you is in the wrong conversation. And so that's where a lot of the kind of the BANT came from was, hey, I got to make sure that you're even ready for this. Budget, yeah, like authority. Are you going to be able to get at that money? Do you really need this? And is there a timing that aligns? So like in the first BANTs I found were in a different order, but essentially it made sense from that perspective. Today, I'm an advocate of qualification through transparency, not through BANT. And transparency means being able to upfront help communicate to a customer what you give up to be great at your core, whether it's pricing, whether it's something that, hey, Marcus, if I'm in your shoes, here's what you might not love about what we do, right? Like we focus here, we don't focus on this stuff. And if you need this stuff, we're not going to be the best choice for you. And that's the concept of the transparency sale, is this idea of when you're buying something online, what do? Well, 86% of you, or actually 99% of you read reviews, but 86% of you go to the negative reviews first. You skip the 5s, you go to the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. And when a product has an average review score between a 4.2 and a 4.5, that's actually optimal for purchase conversion, meaning products that have negative reviews right under them sell at a higher conversion rate than perfect, the 5 stars. Why? Because we need to be able to understand the downside to even process the positive. And when we lead that way, get rid of BANT, embrace transparency, you win faster, you qualify in better, you qualify out faster, and you differentiate in the way that you sell.
Excellent. Okay, let's focus on the book and the 4 levers now.
Yeah.
So describe the 4 levers first of all. And in fact, let's take a step back. Let's define negotiation.
Well, here, I'll take another step back, because you had mentioned something earlier too about the proliferation of information today. I grabbed this book off my shelf as you said it. You may have noticed me do it. This book is from 1910. It's from Thomas Herbert Russell. It's called Salesmanship Theory and Practice. So 1910. I'm going to show you a line. You probably can't see it, so I'll read it to you. But there's 4 words in here, and those 4 words are buyers know more nowadays. Buyers know more nowadays. That's 1910. There's the proliferation of mail order catalogs. I've got a Sears Roebuck catalog from 1908 that looks like Amazon, but in paper form. There was a threat that there's more information available to buyers. Advertising is becoming proliferated as well. What are we going to need salespeople for? And the bottom line has been that sales has always survived because more information has never made it easier on buyers. It's always made it harder. And that if we look at our role as guides and navigators to help expose the pros and the cons, to help buyers predict, because you had talked about fear and status quo and that kind of stuff. Our job is to help buyers predict. It's not to convince them. But to your point about what negotiating is, I want to read a paragraph from right under buyers know more nowadays to you, because I think it's the problem we've created in B2B selling. All right, here it is. The knowledge of buyers has increased, and they are no longer disposed to pay what is asked of them, unless persuaded in their minds that the sellers regulate their prices on some sound basis. Some sound basis. So what does that mean? It means you go to a grocery store, you don't fill your cart, go up to the cashier and go, I have a budget issue, I need a discount. They'd be like, buy less stuff. You don't ask for payment terms. You don't go to the petrol station and ask for discounts. You don't go to restaurants and tell them, hey, I can get a burger cheaper down the street. Like, that's crazy. In B2B, we propose our pricing. We throw it on the table as a proposal, which by definition is this isn't really the price. This is a proposed price. And we invite our customers to come at us. And the minute they do, we justify them coming at us by giving away stuff right away. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to create a sound basis. And it's not hard. It doesn't take you being a badass. You don't have to be an FBI. It means you being a human being in the way that you deliver and propose your pricing, so that negotiating itself, coming to that final end point in the initial deal that leads to the upsell, the cross-sell, the advocacy. I think there's a simple opportunity to do it. And so I'll take a breath there for a second, but I think that's our opportunity here. And they've known it for 115 years.
Well, to build on that, but buyers hire a salesperson to come in because buying creates a set of problems that they can't or don't want to carry alone. And they already have access to information. They already know that alternatives exist, but what they don't have is cover. And so they don't want to just depend on their own judgment. And they are looking for somebody who will push back without humiliating them. They need to slow the decision down without being indecisive or looking indecisive. So that we create the space for them to make the right decision well. And they are going through a process that looks at 4 forces. The push, which is the pain, the catalyst for change now. the pull, which is the desired better future. Then you have inertia, which is the magnetic pull of the status quo. And then you have anxiety, which is what they imagine is going to go wrong if they buy, and then it backfires on them. So it feels like buyers hire a salesperson in, so buying doesn't become a solo act under fire. And when sellers behave like persuaders, what they're actually doing is solving their own problem. When they
Exactly.
behave like partners, they're solving the buyer's problem. And that tension is built because sellers do not focus on the second function. And it's hard to measure. So I'm curious about your response to that.
Well, that's exactly it. It goes back to this idea that, you know, being a guide and a navigator for the buyer is where the value is. And that's where every time that I talk about that transparency piece, I have, you know, some of the more tenured salespeople be like, I've always been like that. Like, and I'm like, well, that's why you're still doing this job, right? It's because it's why you're good at it, is because you've always seen that your responsibility is to help the buyers predict and not to convince. To your point, again, when we hear nothing but perfect five-star speak, our brain at a subconscious level goes, whoa, that can't be true. And we force the buyers to do more homework. And when they do that homework, trust is eroded, sales cycles lengthen, status quo wins more often than not. That's not only the solutions, but to your point about the fear and anxiety, I've always been a believer that our perception of a reward is biased by our perception of the journey to get to that reward. And one weird analogy is, you know, a few years ago, taking my kids to go get ice cream. Right, we were out. The kids are like, you know, my wife leaned over and she was like, "Hey, should we go get some ice cream?" Like, okay. The kids in the back are like, "Ice cream!" Ah! Like they go crazy. We're going. And so there's an ice cream place that they love. It's called Culver's here in the U.S. We drive over there, so we are, you know, consensus sold. All four of us, we're all in. The value of the ice cream, fantastic. We are fully qualified, got the money right here in our pocket. And we are not only that, but we are active in the sales cycle, meaning we showed up, we're there. We get there though, and they had had a labor issue where the inside was closed and it was drive-through only, and there was 14 cars in the line. And so we pulled in, you know, car number 15. I kind of looked at my wife like, oh, crap. Hey, the kids want their ice cream, right? Well, about 2 minutes in, my daughter leans over and she's like, hey, can we just go home? Like, really? Like, yeah, I want to go home. And my son's like, I want to go play some Minecraft. Like, let's get out of here. And we pulled out, we chose the status quo. Had nothing to do with the product, had nothing to do with the budget, had nothing to do with any desire, consensus, none of that. It all had to do with the journey not matching expectations. And so that, I believe, is part of the salesperson's role too, is set journey expectations accurately, consistently, and meet them. That is when you lose to the status quo less often too. But you got to set those expectations early, because if they're not willing to go take that journey, like there's another place here in called Chick-fil-A, and sometimes those lines are long, and people go wait in them. Why? Because they expect the line to be long. When they don't, and they show up and it is, they choose the status quo. I think that expectation, it doesn't have to be perfect, it has to be accurate.
Well, to build on that, on first use, if expectation does not match the real experience, buyer's remorse sets in big time.
Exactly.
And you then have created the conditions for churn to exist. So any deception, any lack of transparency, any exaggeration, hyperbole, omission is then going to create downstream problems, which again, because of the way we've siloed sales and customer success and account management and marketing, it's someone else's problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we've created the culture where sellers sell and run. And that's really problematic. I want to get back to the book now. So,
Yep.
one of the things that's very clear is trust is the leading edge. And you send the message that building trust instead of tough bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
Now, without wanting it to turn political, what we are seeing globally is a high degree of uncertainty and then bullying tactics coming from a leader or two. And that's creating massive distrust. And I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of how to respond when somebody is behaving in an untrustworthy way when you are the buyer, and how to neutralize those tough guy tactics.
Well, I'll tell you. So, as I've been talking about and teaching this four levers negotiating approach, it's funny. Like for all the stuff that I've been teaching over the last few years, I rarely get pushback. And when I do, I'm able to have really good conversations with people. What's funny is as I'm kind of building up to this book launch, the the number of traditional negotiators that are coming after me is hilarious.
Oh,
And
good.
I was called naive by one like last week to go, this naive to think this would work. And I'm like, other than the last 18 years, it's been working fantastically well. And like it aligned to buy, like, and then another one was just like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, I, so I think it's funny that we've got these traditional negotiators, and the political example that you're showing is a traditional negotiator, old school, bully your way into things. Again, I don't think that is sustainable at all anymore, especially in this world. And again, like I've said a couple of times here, in the world of business to business, I don't think it's sustainable to have every single one of your deals different with different payment terms, different everything based on how well or poorly you negotiated it. There was a story from the 1910s that I just talked about on LinkedIn about a guy that had that happen. And his quote here was that he actually, for the people he had good relationships with that he was selling to, they were paying more than the jerks. Which, again, and that's what happens, right? Like the jerks, the people that are like, hey, it's too expensive. I'm not going to buy this unless you discount it. He was like, all right, right? So like the nicer you were, the better relationship, the more they paid, the worse you were. Like, how's that sustainable? Like, I just think that's bananas.
Well, Charlie Green has a lovely response to a request for discounting, which is we don't discount, and you pay the same price that Google and Amazon pay, and it'll never be any different.
Well, I can
And
take you through the levers because that's the premise, but it's not without being like it loses the tough guy,
yeah,
right? And so, if you don't mind, I'll
please.
tell you the
No,
quick
no, no,
story.
absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so here's what had happened. I had gotten promoted to be SVP of sales, but traditional negotiating I sucked at. And so one of the first things I got thrown into is one of my reps was working on a massive deal with a big oil services company here in the US. $2.5 million a year for 3 years was the proposed deal. And they said yes, but they called my rep and they're like, we got to work on the numbers and the commercial terms. And my rep was like, I got to call my manager. And they were like, well, I don't have time for this. Whoever that manager is, can we just get in a room in Houston? Let's sit down and bang this thing out. So my rep calls me. I go in to Houston thinking it's just going to be me, my rep, and this guy. Unfortunately, I walk in and the room opens and they had brought the whole procurement team. And they were ready to kick my ass. And this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So this $7.5 million total contract value deal is couch
Cookie
cushion money,
money.
but still there was a woman by the door that was like, let's go. Like one of those traditional, haymaker throw in. I love a good battle negotiation. I look at my rep and I'm like, I'm about to get boat raced. Like I sucked at traditional negotiating. What had happened is though, I had just come from our headquarters in California where I had had a conversation with my CFO about like, what are the true drivers of the business? And he laid out 4 of them for me. And so I walked in and I think I was just trying to buy some time and accidentally stumbled on this approach. I said, hey, before we get started, can I go up to the whiteboard and just write down the 4 things that not only drive our pricing model, but they drive our business? Turns out these are the 4 things that drive every business to business company for profit in the world. But anyway, they were like, sure, have fun. I walked up and I wrote 4 things up there. Lever number one is volume, meaning how much stuff you buy. Our business is driven by volume commitments. How much products, services, technology, hours, resources, whatever. The more you buy, better. The less you buy, not as good, right? That's a big driver of your pricing and our business. Number 2 is the timing of cash or how fast you pay. We drive our business on collecting cash, actually having money sooner, better than slower. Who knew? Number 3 is the length of commitment or how long you commit to our products, technology, services. Commit longer, better, shorter, not as good. And then number 4 is the timing of the deal or predictability. We have to resource our business, this deal. We have investors we have to satisfy. Our ability to predict and forecast is highly valuable. I wrote those 4 things up there. So volume, timing of cash, length of commitment, timing of the deal. They looked at them and they were like, fascinating. Like they couldn't have given a crap. I think they were most impressed by my penmanship was about the extent of it. And they went right into, Todd, hey, listen, we're raring to go. This division's ready to go here. Unfortunately, from a budgetary perspective, it is 35% too high. You got to get 35% off of this thing in order to move forward. I'm like, okay. So what do you do? Well, there is the approach of going into your value argument, which I would not recommend. Like, we believe there's an ROI here, and it's like, shut up, like that ship sailed. Number two is the traditional ping pong approach, which is can't do 35%, but I can do 10% without even asking my manager. Would that work? Right? And you go back and forth. And where you end is just a contribution to the charity of the customer's bottom line, and that's it. Or number three is to go through the levers. And so that's what we did, and magic ensued. It stopped being customer vendor. It was a bunch of us trying to work within the rules to figure out the best deal. So we've established the sound basis. This is the price. But hey, the price is based on your volume commitment, how much you bought or how much you're committing to, that price you have there. It's based on upfront annual net 30 payments. It's based on a 3-year commitment. And then we'll talk about the mutual alignment around timing in a minute. We went through each one. Commit to more volume. We're willing to pay you for that in the form of a discount. Like add those other divisions now, and there's a discount there. Pay us faster. I know upfront annual net 30, it's pretty fast, but if you want to pay for the out years later, that helps us. There's value in that, something we're willing to pay you for in the form of a discount. We don't have to go get another round of funding. Commit to more years. 3 years, cool. 4 years, better. 5 years, even better. We'll pay you in a form of a discount to do that. And then number four, the timing of the deal. If you're willing to help us predict by mutually aligning on when you can get this done, we'll lay it out together. We'll guide you through the rest of this thing. There's value in our ability to predict. If you're willing to hold to it, it's something we're willing to pay you for in the form of a discount. Magic happened. They negotiated their own deal. We left as friends. A couple of things did come up later that I can talk through if you'd like. They used it to negotiate the other divisions. And then when one individual left, went to another company, called us, was like, hey, the pricing's still based on those things. It becomes sound basis pricing, like you said, but there's flexibility within the levers. Buy more stuff, pay faster, commit longer, help us forecast. And if you want to pull one of the other ones has to be pushed. That's the simple concept. You don't even have to buy the book now.
And how much was the deal worth in the end?
So what they ended up doing is they paid us all 3 years up front. We didn't have to go get another round. We gave them 10% for that. So 5 years for each additional year they accelerated. And they helped us predict. There was some fun around that one, by the way, but we paid them in the form of a 5% discount to do that. So they ended up with 15% off. They never even went back to their 35 idea. Like they never even came up again. We ended up with a massive check, and it was like somewhere in the $6.5 to $7 million range that we got wired 30 days after the deal signed.
Very nice. Excellent. So if you're listening, please pay attention. Stop giving away unilateral and unasked for discounts. Stop yielding to the pressure. And if you haven't read my posts on PICOS, P-I-C-O-S, which is the price improvement and cost optimization strategy that was developed in General Motors by the former head buyer of meat for Walmart. So he learnt his craft dealing with abattoir owners. You will find that that is often the modus operandi of many procurement teams. And it can be utterly neutralized by the framework that Todd just laid out. And you will save yourself an awful lot of stress and angst and get to keep a lot more money because what you keep matters more than what you make.
Absolutely. That's it. And it's funny that when you do it this way, the anxiety should go away. Because what ends up happening too is transparency begets transparency oftentimes. When you're able to share the cards and go, hey, listen, this is what our pricing's based on. If you need some help somewhere, here's the ways to do it. Here, negotiate your own deal. Let us know when you're ready. It's amazing how that transparency begets transparency. I would also argue that if you're a startup or you're launching a new product, I get it. There needs to be maybe a little malleability in the price because you haven't established value in the market yet. But like I'm teaching massive companies that are discounting because somebody's good at procurement. And like, what are you doing? You've got 10,000 customers paying an amount already. One of my customers right now, they're massive. They're $1 billion company. And I asked their CRO, so I'm going in to do their kickoff here soon. I asked their CRO, I was like, how many customers you got? I go, like 10,000. All right, cool. What percentage of those are paying near list price? And he was like,
None.
around zero. Like, what? Like, that's nuts, right? Like, it's bananas. There's such an opportunity. Everybody's paying a different amount. Why not have that layer?
Well, there's another really important psychological factor to deal with here, which is if you discount unilaterally, you've just told me you lied about your price.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
whilst I can forgive a lie, I'm not going to forget it. And what we do is we educate our buyers to keep squeezing until the pip squeaks.
Can I make a comment there? There's
Please.
something that drives me bananas that salespeople do all the time. And it's this idea that, hey, we don't care about pricing terms or we don't care about this. Here's what I mean. I live outside of Chicago. There is a forest preserve right out the back window, and I've got dogs. When the weather's nice, the family doesn't mind walking the dogs. But when the weather sucks, it's this guy that's got to walk the dogs, right? So I go out there and there's a path. I'm like, go get it done. Let's go. So get the dogs. Rainy, it's cold. Like, go, come on. Dog is doing his business. But imagine if this happened. It's doing his business. There's a rock. And under the rock, there's a little piece of paper. And so you kick it over, and there's a $20 bill under there. What do? You probably go, oh, can I keep it? But then you probably go, is there other money hidden around here somewhere? That was easy. I just accidentally stumbled on this. Now you don't care about the cold. You don't care about the wet. You're now crisscrossing and you just slowed everything down. Now, in sales, the same thing happens. The buyer wants to get this deal done. Like, let's go. And then they come to you, you've proposed net 30 payment terms, for example, and they go, hey, listen, our standard's net 60. Now, what does the rep do? Doesn't give a crap and goes, hey, can't do net 60, but I can do net 45. Would that work? Now, as simple as that 15 days is, that is the exact same thing as stumbling over money because you just told the buyer that, hey, we proposed stuff here, but all you got to do is ask to pay a little slower. Now you've told the buyer, who cares about getting it done quick? I'm going to keep crisscrossing this path, kicking over everything because that was easy. What else can I get? We've got to be so careful. When a customer asks for net 60, all you do is this. You start by being a human being. Like, hey, net 60, like what drives that? Is that a company policy? All right, cool. Number two is take them through all four levers again. Like, hey, you might recall our pricing is based on volume, how much you buy, timing of cash, how quick you pay, length of commitment, how long you commit, and timing of the deal, forecastability. Your pricing is based on upfront annual net 30. If you want net 60, you can have it, but we got to adjust something else to make up for it. Let's go through that together. And it's hilarious how often the buyer goes, we'll just do net 30. Or if you want net 45 and they want to pay a little faster in other ways, they want to commit longer, they want to commit to a little more volume, they want to help you predict, well, then it's worth it. But the point being, establish your sound basis, as Thomas Herbert Russell said, with flexibility within the levers. And the minute you give away anything for free, no matter how small, you've actually ironically slowed down your deal, not sped it up. And to your point, Marcus, you have signaled to the buyer that it was a proposal and not a sound basis price.
Well, I'm conscious that we're rapidly approaching time. So let's go through the four levers first, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper. So I will shut up now and over to you. Four levers.
Well, so the four levers are those, right? Volume, so how much you buy.
All right.
Product, technology, services. Timing of cash, so how fast you pay. Length of commitment, how long you commit. And timing of the deal, forecastability, and mutual alignment. I just want to scream out, mutual alignment does not mean this month only, 30% off. Your fake expiring discounts, that is actually not mutual alignment. Mutual alignment is saying to the customer, hey, listen, there's value in our ability to predict. We're actually going to pay you to help us predict, not to accelerate, to help us predict. That actually, in the short term, might create some little like, oh, but we need them to sign here in this month. Like, okay, cool. Maybe they won't. However, that predictability and smoothing out the hockey stick is so valuable. You're changing the thing here. You're not paying them to jam into a preconceived window that you've created. You're paying them to help you predict. You've given them the why. You will be shocked how that helps your forecast and gives your customer comfort and certainty and alignment. It's that one's my favorite. I've been using that one for 15 years, and my forecasts have been deadly accurate as a result. And my reps have loved it because they're not, spending New Year's Eve trying to close deals.
Well, I look at the way you talk about negotiating and selling, and I think what we're really dealing with here are, first of all, deal with the truth,
Yeah.
ensure that there is mutual understanding, create the conditions where there is genuine optionality. So the buyer feels like they have choice and agency, because the moment you start taking that away, the brain automatically resists. And create the conditions where you're each making small, ongoing mutual commitments, and you build the negotiation. What you're not doing is you're not waiting till the end. I think the biggest mistake that I see many salespeople make is they negotiate at the end
Yes.
instead of from the opening moment. And the net result of that is that you create an adversarial setup. And you know, so I'm curious, when you see sales leaders jump into a negotiation, what are the blind spots that they bring, and how do they balls it up?
Well, if we've done what you just said, which is lay the foundation early in the sales process, to be able to tell a customer in that first conversation, listen, we have not fully scoped this. I'm making a prediction here, but my understanding based on similar customers and your desired outcomes is your investment's probably going to be between X and Y. And it's going to be based on, and I usually share the first three levers. It's going to be based on how much you buy, upfront annual net 30 payments, and you're going to have to commit annually or whatever that happens to be. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're talking about a 6 or a 7-figure solution to a 4 or a 5-figure buyer, one of you is in the wrong conversation. Do you want to know that now or later? Set that expectation, because that makes negotiating at the goal line so much easier. You don't have the last minute, I found an alternative for 70% off. Like that just goes away. And what ends up happening is, as long as all of your salespeople are sharing this consistent pricing, leaders can swing in and be there as the kind of the, I wouldn't say reinforcement, but just be there as the, yep, go, right? Versus the person that helicopters in and blows up everything that you've done. I've got a hobby. My podcast is called the Sales History Podcast. And my last episode for this last season is called the Salesman Who Without Courage, or something like that. You'll see what it is. But it's about a salesperson who is working on a big deal, wires his manager saying, hey, we're $500 too high. We need to cut. The manager says, don't cut. I will be there tomorrow. All right. So the manager comes out and sits down with this rep, and the rep wants to talk about it. And the manager is like, listen, you don't cut, right? Like you just don't. Like you're like that those little boys that would be in the water, and it's 18 inches of water or whatever, and they're pretending like they're swimming, but they're actually not. You're doing the same thing here. Don't cut. The price is the price. Courage, confidence, that is what's going to lead you. And if you can't do that, then I'm probably going to have to find somebody else to do it. This rep was discounting because the customer asked. The manager said, and the rep says to the manager, hey, who do you want to visit when you're here? Like the board of this customer and all that. And he's like, I'm not going. I'm going to sit out here. And if you screw this up, I'll come in, but that's it. Arm the rep to be able to go in and go, hey, listen, the price is the price. That's it. Remove the fear of getting in trouble if he doesn't get the deal. And the customer was like, all right, they signed. And like this celebration. It's a story from 1907. It's been like, anxiety has been a part of negotiating forever. Managers' roles is to instill that confidence, remove the fear, and help reinforce the structure. And that's it. They shouldn't be helicoptering in to negotiate deals. Arm your reps to do it.
Well, I was on one of our Sellers Anonymous community calls yesterday, and the guest speaker is a client of mine, and he is currently running a team of 2 salespeople and himself, and they're outperforming the team of 12 that he inherited. But what's interesting is, for 2 years, they have not discounted a cent, because it doesn't need to be that way, because they understand what the customer is looking for, and they fixate on creating a mutual agreement. And too often, the seller abdicates control and gives away their value because they are in a state of scarcity and fear. And if we go back to what you said right at the top of the hour regarding a pipeline, you don't need a huge pipeline. What you need is a pipeline filled with the right prospects, and you have spent time building the relationship. And you're spending time across the organization so that by the time you get to the final stages, procurement isn't being helicoptered in. Procurement's been your partner all along.
Exactly.
And you help them come out of the goal mouth. So it's you and them kicking into an open goal against their problem. But all too often, because of this scarcity mentality, that almost never happens. And so the seller is going in scared, behind quota, under pressure. Their bosses are telling them that they have to meet a number and they have to bring a deal forward. Now, I remember one of my clients sensibly planted his feet when he was being put under pressure. And 2 weeks before the end of the quarter, he refused to budge. He risked being fired and being put on a pip. Anyway, the deal came in at 6x the amount 2 weeks after the end of the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that level of waste is fiduciary negligence on behalf of leadership. And unless salespeople learn how to have that conversation internally, and this is where I would recommend Mary Gentile's fabulous book, Giving Voice to Values. She was a Harvard professor who was seconded to MIT, and she surveyed every one of their MBA students over a 7-year period. So it was about 760 students. And she asked them, have you ever been asked to do something that was counter to your values and you felt ethically icky about? Anyway, 100% of them said yes.
Mm-hmm. I would say yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that these people who are senior, they're on the fast track, are being put under so much pressure to do that. Now, what was interesting from her data is 24% of them actually push back with no negative repercussions. And 10% not only push back with no negative repercussions, but they change the direction and behavior of the people pushing them. Now, that is a replicable skill. And it's something that I think we need to teach our junior people right out of the gate.
Yep.
So we've pretty much come to time, unfortunately. So we'll have to reconvene at.
Have to do a fifth.
But I'd be curious, in terms of wrapping up, what is there anything else that you'd like to add that I haven't asked as yet?
No, I think we've covered just about everything. I mean, I think to your point, I had just written this in a LinkedIn post earlier that the most difficult part of negotiating isn't procurement. It's typically with the salesperson's own fear.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's important. I think just
Amen
giving
to
people,
that.
yeah. Yeah. And it just like give your individual reps and your team a structure, a framework where they can establish, as Herbert Russell said in 1910, a sound basis, and then use that as the structure for your pricing. And I'm telling you, you'll build trust at the goal line. You'll discount less. Your forecast will become more accurate. I believe that it's not only helpful, like your deal values will go up, but I think, again, with the proliferation of information, peers connecting, AI exposing pricing models already, you got to embrace this right now.
Okay, I do have a final question, actually.
Okay.
So I'll keep you on a little bit longer. How does doing this affect key metrics like cost of customer acquisition, EBIT, net recurring revenue, gross recurring revenue, profitability, and those sorts of critical metrics? Do you have any accurate data on what the impact is when people move away from traditional shitty negotiating to doing it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen anecdotally, so I'm just me, like I don't have a team, I don't have analysts, but I've had plenty of CROs tell me a couple of things. One of them is their time from decision to close has sped up. I had a couple of clients tell me that they are their discount percentages are lower by 20 to 30%. In most cases, it's had 7- and 8-figure impacts on a couple of larger organizations. And that's in terms of profitability, but it's also in terms of at renewal time. Remember, every dollar you give away in the form of a discount multiplies by how long they stay, how much more stuff they buy, and the minute they go to another organization and they expect that price, you're multiplying it. Oh, it's like this rolling hill of margin erosion. So you're speeding that time to close, you're increasing your profitability, you're discounting less, and in many cases, you're actually helping your deferred revenue because you're collecting cash faster as well. That has big impacts not only on investor sentiment around your organizations, but your ability to invest and future-proof your organization. So those have been kind of the anecdotal stuff. I don't have the hard data, but I hear it a lot.
Well, if you increase EBIT, if you improve revenue quality, if you increase forecast accuracy, if you are more efficient in your acquisition of customers and your costs go down, retention, expansion improve.
Yeah,
All of these affect NRR, LTV, EBIT, CAC, your organizational risk drops, and every one of those affects the multiple.
yes.
I think it's 1%, has something like a 6 to 12x return.
Mhm,
So what you're actually doing is driving shareholder value by learning how to negotiate, by holding your price,
mhm,
by being honest and transparent, and not by um, giving away margin. And bear in mind, whatever you discount today, you're going to pay for at renewal because you're already starting off on your back foot. And
yeah,
so the enterprise value is going to be dramatically hurt as well. So you do not do your shareholders any good whatsoever. And whilst in the short term it may look like a win, it isn't. It's
exactly.
actually a shot in your own foot.
Yep. That is so true. And we fail to see it. And it does not have to be hard. You don't need multiple days sitting going, oh, he touched his nose, he's lying. Oh, I saw an eye twitch. Like, screw that. Right? This is just volume, timing of cash, length of commitment, timing of the deal. You can learn it in 20 minutes. You could deliver it this afternoon. Like, and all of a sudden, you've immediately built trust, discounted less, and improved your forecasting.
Todd, this has been brilliant. Um, can you give us some book recommendations that people will probably not have heard of?
Well, I really only read books that are 100+ years old.
Those are the ones
So
I want.
yeah, exactly. And so my favorite of all time is sitting here in my hands. This is from 1911. This is Arthur Sheldon's The Art of Selling. It is just a masterpiece, and he's got a quote in here that is, true salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go. It's like one of the greatest sales quotes of all time is in this guy. So this is a fantastic one. There's another one that is over here. It is called Certain Success by Norval Hawkins. I wish you could see this. The cover is like leather. This thing is freaking amazing. Like, I treat it very gently. This one is from 1921. Norval Hawkins was Henry Ford's top salesperson, became the general manager, which is what we would call a CRO or SVP of sales today. And he wrote two books, one called Certain Success, another one was called Selling Things. Certain Success is fantastic. The way this guy's brain worked. This is challenger selling 100+ years ahead of challenger sale. I think it is fantastic. And then my last recommendation is over here. It is called Ginger Talks. It is from a guy named Worthington Holman. This is from 1905. It's Ginger Talks. The Ginger Talks of a sales manager to his men. All this is inspiring motivational stories that managers could use to inspire their sales teams. Worthington Holman is a guy that John Patterson hired in the 1890s. He was a school teacher in Massachusetts. John Patterson saw that his salespeople had no ability to write. They're dumbass writers. And he was like, he found this school teacher in Massachusetts, Worthington C. Holman, hired him to teach his salespeople how to write. Worthington Holman went on to write some of the great, like this Ginger Talks is fantastic. He also founded a magazine in 1903 called Salesmanship Magazine, which is fantastic, from 1903 to 1908. And then he sold it to Arthur Sheldon. It became the business philosopher in 1908. But Ginger Talks, The Art of Selling, and Certain Success are fantastic books. I would recommend those three wholly. And then Thomas Herbert Russell's 1910 book, Salesmanship Theory and Practice. I've got this thing multiple tabbed. I think he did a really, really good job too.
Todd, this has been spectacularly good fun. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, toddcaponi.com is a simple way. I've got free resources, articles that I write. Again, the history stuff is a hobby, so I just write and share on there all the time. The Sales History Podcast is a fun one to check out. And then, of course, shameless self-promotion, the book, Four Levers Negotiating. Depending on when this comes out, it's either pre-sale now or it's available wherever you get your books, audiobook, digital, whatever format you like. And yeah, reach out if you've got questions. We'd love to help.
Excellent. Todd Caponi, thank you.
Marcus, I always have a blast. Thank you for having me.
So this is Marcus Kauke signing off once again from the Inquisitor Podcast. If you found this useful, share it, like, comment, and get in touch with both Todd or I. If you've got questions, we're both quite approachable despite my grumpy demeanor. And in the meantime, stay safe and happy selling. Bye-bye.